Hi everybody, this is Miss Kersch, and this is the Advanced Chemistry Pre-Lab lecture for the lab molecular mass of a gas. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk very briefly about the lab molecular mass of a gas. You need to use this to set up your lab notebook, and then we'll be ready to do the lab. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to work to prove what Avogadro found. Okay, now Avogadro gave us the relationship that 1 mole of any gas is always equal to a volume of 22.4 liters at STP. Okay, so if you know what a gas is and know what it weighs and know the molecular mass of it, then you should be able to figure out at STP what the volume is of that gas. Okay, so because of this relationship, we can also take the density of a gas, which is mass over volume, and use that. So if I take the density, which is equal to the molecular mass over 22.4, and I know the mass and I know the volume, then I can figure out the density. Now, because both of these are the same, we can actually set them up equal to each other. So, for example, if I know the mass of my gas and I know the volume at STP, and I know that the volume at STP is 22.4, then I can actually figure out the molecular mass of a gas. Now, we'll say that I'm using something like methane. So I know how much my methane gas weighs. We'll say it weighs 10 grams. And I know what the volume is. We'll say the volume is 10 liters. So at 22.4 liters, I should be able to figure out what the molecular mass of my methane is. And it should come out to be, if methane weighs, let's see, carbon is 12 and 4, so that's 16. So it should weigh 16 grams per mole. So I can use that, and if I have 22.4 liters, then all the math should come out correctly. So if I have an unknown gas, and I know what the mass of my unknown gas is, and I know the volume of it, then I should be able to figure out what the mass is per mole, and I can figure out what the gas is. And that's kind of what we're going to do in our lab. We're going to figure out the mass of my gas, and I know the volume in the lab, so I can figure out, from that, I can calculate what the molecular mass of that gas would be at 22.4 liters, and then I can try and figure out what my gas is. So what we're going to do is we're going to collect a gas under laboratory conditions. So the room is not going to be at 0 degrees. Although it does feel like it in the wintertime, it's really not going to be. So, and also we're going to figure out the pressure of the room that day. So we're going to use the barometer in the lab, and we're going to write down what our pressure is in the lab, what our temperature is in the lab. We're going to convert that to STP, and then we're going to use it to try and figure out what my unknown gas is going to be. So, okay, at this point, you should have your lab notebook out. So the title of the lab will be the molecular mass of a gas. You can leave the dates blank because I'm filming this before our winter break, and we're actually going to be doing the lab after the winter break. So when you set up your lab notebook, just leave that blank, and we'll fill that in when we can schedule our lab. The purpose of this lab is to determine the molecular mass of an unknown substance from the measurements and the density and the volume of the vapor. The equipment that we're going to use, very simple, very standard lab stuff. We're going to be using Erlenmeyer flasks, standard ring stand, graduated cylinders, Bunsen burner, utility clamps, and thermometers. Very standard chemistry type equipment. The chemical that we're going to use is going to be an unknown, organic liquid. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to try and figure that out. Now, the reason why we use an organic liquid is because they vaporize very, very easily. So we can measure the weight and then we can vaporize it and measure the volume of that quantity of liquid. So we're going to start off with a liquid, but we're going to very, very quickly change it into a gas, and then that's what we're going to use to calculate it. Okay, the procedure is basically the straightforward procedure that I'm going to give you in the lab handout. So you can fill that in very, very easily. You can just write it straight into your notebook as is. The last thing is I want you to make the following data table in your lab notebook. So we're going to have the mass of the flask and a little cap. We're going to put a little cap on it with some aluminum foil. The mass of the flask, the cap, and the vapor pressure. And then we're going to figure out the volume of the flask, the temperature of a water bath, and the barometric pressure of the room. So this is a very, very simple data table that I want you to put into your lab notebook. And from there, once we have our data, then we're going to do our calculations and we're going to figure out what the unknown liquid is that I give you. And that's the end. Thank you, and I'll see you in the lab.